Hello and welcome back to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett. And let me ask you a question. Do you want to unlock the secret to client retention? Because I know that for me, it's something that is the key to this industry, maybe most industries, because it's one thing to be able to get leads in the door, but it's another thing to be able to incubate those leads and turn them into closed transactions at some point in the future. And we're in a time, especially in mortgage and real estate right now, where the gestation period of a lead is so long. And the time between transactions is longer than it's ever been, making what I'm going to talk about today, which is follow-up and communication, probably the most important thing that we can do as mortgage and real estate professionals. You know, it used to be that, and maybe not used to be, but there's certainly been times where you would pre-approve a borrower and within days or weeks at the longest, they would be under contract for a home, right? There was plenty of inventory, affordability was solid, and transaction moved quickly. Now what we find is that there's very little inventory. It's very difficult for someone to find the exact perfect home that they're looking for. And as a result, sometimes they just end up renewing their lease, even though they really want to buy a home. And now, I mean, that's a minimum of typically 6 months before they're even able to be able to transact. And so the incubation period has become so long. And then you think about home buyers, right? The average time that someone would live in their home used to be about 4 years, 4 to 7 on the outset. And for many people, it was quicker than that, especially during times of rapid appreciation, when interest rates were low for a very long period of time, or at least declining over the last, decade and a half, like they had been. And now what we find is the opposite of that. We have people locked into their homes with really low interest rates that aren't looking to move. Now they will someday, hopefully, but it's longer than it's ever been. And so how do you maintain a relationship over a longer period of time with your customer? So that's what I want to dig into a little bit today. This is not like the full book on how to do this, but it's certainly some ideas and some strategies that you might want to consider. And maybe after watching this episode, you realize that really dialing in your follow-up process is also the key to your business. Maybe it's the thing that you've been missing, because we get so focused on the new lead. And I don't know that most people realize how much money is left on the table because of their failure to follow up. Matter of fact, I think if you were to talk to every client that you had spoken to that didn't end up purchasing at the time that you spoke to them, and found out if they ever bought a house at any time after that with somebody else, that number would be a staggeringly high number for most people. And then if you took and converted that into how many dollars you lost by not staying in touch, I think you would agree with me that this is probably the most important thing that you can do. So when I think about follow-up, and I have, a list of items here I want to go through, but the first thing for me that it's not even on my list, because most people don't think about this, but for me, the most important thing is setting the expectation up front with and it doesn't matter if it's a lead or a closed transaction, setting the expectation that you're going to follow up, right? I'm going to stay in touch. It's no different than if you went on a first date with somebody. At the end of it, you may not have a second date scheduled, but you might say something like, man, I had a really great time. We should do this again at some time, right? And go, yeah, there's like confirmation that we should stay in touch. Well, it's no different with a client. You have to set that expectation. And for me, I actually think that's what gives me the not only ability, but the confidence to follow up later, because I told them I was going to. So the first thing that you need to work on, in my opinion, if you don't have this dialed in, is setting the right expectation with your client, whether it's the lead, it's the first time they've ever talked to you. Let them know, look, you're going to hear from me, and here's the ways in which I'm going to communicate with you. If they're a closed loan, someone who's done a transaction with you. They should know very clearly that you're going to be following up after closing, checking in with them, see how everything went. You're going to be doing an annual financial review of their situation. Notice I said annual financial review. I didn't call it an annual mortgage review, which is what we've been calling it for years. I was actually at a conference recently and someone called it an annual financial review. And I'm like, that's so much better than an annual mortgage review. Who wants to just review their mortgage? It doesn't really tell what it is you're talking to them about, because in most cases, their mortgage is a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Nothing's changed with their mortgage. It's their financial situation that may have changed. And how does their mortgage, factor into their overall financial situation? So, but your clients shouldn't be surprised when you reach out to them to do their annual financial review. They, matter of fact, should be expecting it. Or maybe they forgot, but at least they go, oh yeah, Tony told me he was going to follow up with me and we're going to review my situation. So shouldn't be a surprise. So that's the first part, is just setting the proper expectations. Now, I would ask you to evaluate how it is that you're doing your follow-up right now. What is your process for communication? For me, I'll be honest, for many years, it was my yellow notepad, right? Like I would use a yellow notepad to pre-qualify clients. And then my follow-up process was flipping back through the pages to see who I had previously talked to. This is not the most efficient system, but it is a system. It is something. Something's better than nothing. But if I was looking at myself and that's what I was doing at the time, I'd be like, okay, let's evaluate what I'm currently doing and figure out, is this the best process? Here's the problem with the system that I used, especially in light of what I mentioned earlier. The gestation period is way too long. You've probably gone through, if you even use a yellow notepad anymore, but if you do, hopefully you've gone through 2 or 3 notepads potentially before this person transacts. So that is just not effective. You really need a database. And you need a database that, when a lot of people think of their database, they just think of their past clients, their closed loans, their people they've done transactions with. And that is an important segment of your database for sure, because they know, like, and trust you. They did business with you. Hopefully you did a good job. But incubating those leads, those pre-approvals, is just as important. So I would start by evaluating the process you have today and be honest with yourself, because who else are you trying to impress? Just be honest with yourself about what you're currently doing today. And if you don't have a great process, then how is it that you might be able to improve? I would say having a database system or a CRM system that allows you to communicate in multiple different mediums in today's world is highly important. Hopefully when you're talking to a lead, you're asking them their preferred mode of communication, right? Do you prefer a phone call? Do you prefer a text message? Do you prefer email? Because even today, there's still people that are like, look, if you don't email me, you're probably not going to get a hold of me, or I'm probably not going to respond. There's other people who are like, don't even think about emailing me. That'll go into the black hole. You got to text me. So you need to know these preferred communication ways, and then you need to have a CRM that supports the different ways in which people like to communicate. And I would pay very close attention to the style of their communication, meaning if they're very short and to the point with their emails, then I would try to be very short and to the point with your emails to them. If they like to really get into the details, you can tell they're a detail-oriented person, they think out their whole thoughts, you might want to put a little bit more time into how you curate an email for that person, because obviously details and thorough communication are important to them. Same thing with text messages. Do they use emojis? Do they not use emojis? Sounds silly, but you know what? It really does connect people quickly if they see that you communicate in a similar style to them. So just a few best practices you might want to consider there. Now, when you think about follow-up, I can tell when I do business or transact with an organization and I'm put onto some automated communication campaign. Doesn't it drive you crazy when you know that every Tuesday at 2:00, this company is going to call you and follow up with you? Like, it's super annoying. So I would say be very careful about your automated communication. And now I think that automated communication is important, but it can't feel like automated communication. And one way that you can do that is, like I just mentioned, using different mediums for follow-up. Maybe it's a voicemail drop one time. Maybe it's and I love these, voice text, right? So like not voice to text where it like dictates for you, but where you actually record a message and text it to them, an audible message, like a voicemail, but through text. That's a very good way of communicating with people. If you're not doing that, I would incorporate that into your process. Everyone sees that and they're like, wonder what they have to say. People love to click on those and listen to them. So, and it's different. Not a lot of people do it. Maybe you do throw in an email here or there, as well as just, good old-fashioned phone calls don't hurt either. So mix up the style of communication, and then I would personally set up, what I like about like the CRM that we use is you can completely customize the amount of days in between. It's not like, they're going to get this email every week or every other week. Like you could set up, hey, I'm going to talk to them on this day, and then 24 hours later or 12 hours later or whatever it is, they're going to get this text message from me. Or maybe it's 10 minutes later, right? Maybe you have your CRM set up to 10 minutes after your phone call. You're going to send them a quick communication, thanking them for the call or whatever the case may be. But then after that, maybe it's an email, maybe it's a voicemail drop. So change the spacing of the delivery and change the medium in which you're doing the communication. Those can really make it feel like it's not just an automated follow-up, but that it's more personalized. Even if it's automated, there's ways of making automation feel more personalized. And then in my opinion, you do have to pepper in some actual, real communication with them that's not automated, especially with leads that are in process. Like, a phone call every once in a while, I think is really important just to touch base. And then, think about those timelines. I mentioned it, but think about how long am I going to stay in communication with someone, and at what cadence is that communication going to be? And again, you got to be careful not to overdo it. It can't seem too automated, but it also can't be too frequent. Even if you're mixing up the different mediums, maybe it starts off. It depends on the situation. Maybe it starts off with a little bit of frequency, but then maybe that dies down, and till it maybe gets to the point where you're sending, 2 text messages, 2 voicemail drops, and 2 emails a year, right? I mean, maybe that's all that it needs to be. 8 communications a year or something like that. It really depends on how hot the lead is and kind of, what you learned about them. But I think that's a totally reasonable amount of times to touch somebody. I remember I've been through trainings in the past where they recommend like, you need to touch your clients 60 times a year or 35 times a year. Like that's insanity in my opinion. So it's not necessary, but you do need to make the communication impactful, thought-provoking, and hopefully something that triggers a response from them so that you can have a little bit of, dialogue. I mentioned all the different, methods that you can use. And I just want to emphasize, the voice text. I really like that way of getting into someone's inbox. And I do find that they're going to be more likely to listen to that than maybe even a voicemail. I don't know about you guys, but these days when I get a voicemail on my phone, someone leaves a message, I'll literally go, well, half the time with my phone carrier, they don't show up. But even when they do, I forget about them. It's just not something. But the text messages, for some reason, I tend to be able to get to those more quickly. And so, those are just a few thoughts. I don't want to make this a really long video. I want this to be more thought-provoking than anything, because I feel like follow-up and communication is the number one place where mortgage and real estate people lose. If you think about leakage, where am I losing the most money in my business? It's by not having a really good follow-up strategy. And so I hope this gave you a few practical ideas, a few tips, a few things to consider. And I wouldn't stop here with this episode. If this is something that is broken in your system, I would seek out some other videos, get some other strategies, listen to multiple practitioners out there to see what it is that they're doing and come up with the strategy that works best for you. If you don't have a CRM, the one that I'm referring to is called Bonzo. It's available to single users. Some companies use it. Our company uses it, but you don't have to be, at our company to get access to Bonzo. It is something that individual users can just sign up and pay for and utilize. But what I love about it most is the fact that it allows you to communicate in all these different mediums. And I think in today's world, that's what people are looking for. That's what's going to catch someone's attention. So with that, you guys, I hope you pulled an idea for this, or if nothing else, got inspired to think about how it is that you're doing follow-up in your business. As always, I appreciate your time and attention watching Market Shares. I know there's a lot of mortgage information out there, and I appreciate those of you who take the time to tune in every week here. And if you enjoy this, we do drop a new episode every single Friday at 10 a.m. We do interviews, we do kind of some business and sales tips like this. We try to mix it up and give you market data, all sorts of different content here to keep it different. It's like different mediums, right? You see how there's a theme here. But you guys, thank you so much for your time and attention. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next week. Take care.